of recession are growing, showing up in the stock market.
GDP, first look, first quarter, is a nasty minus 1.4.
Gas prices, shocking drivers at the pump.
People can't afford to pay their bills.
Inflation is much too high.
A recession is when your neighbor loses his job.
If you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready.
The most important thing to remember is not to panic. We've helped our clients through this before, and we're going to get through it again.
Everyone, regardless of your stage in life, is impacted by recession. With the proper plan, we're going to get through this together. Welcome back to the Recession Survival Guide podcast. I'm Scott Bishop.
And I'm Michael Smith. Well, Scott, last episode we talked about what a recession is, and now we've got 2 declining quarters of GDP, which technically you've seen a lot of people argue that that's what a recession is. Now, we'll still see if that's going to be the case, but now we're hearing lots of discussion and we're hearing the word recession. The narrative has definitely shifted, and typically what happens in a recession is we get layoffs, right? You talked about your son, that he got laid off from Oracle, right? We've heard many people in the news. We got the new crying CEO or CFO out there on LinkedIn that's apologizing and upset about laying off people. So the layoffs are now becoming a big buzzword. And if I remember correctly, back in 2014, 2015, Houston was experiencing lots of layoffs. And you wrote the Layoff Survival Guide. So I why don't you talk a little bit about what that is, what that did, and some of the questions that are in there?
Well, back in 2014 and 15, it was really about the oil patch. The price of oil went down, the price of natural gas went down, and I got called by USA Today saying, hey, there's a bunch of layoffs. Help us write an article about what's going on. And that turned into an article being called, Are You Getting Paid to Quit? About people getting packages, severance, and trying to figure out what to do. And I realized at a time like that, it's quite emotional and quite difficult. So I wanted to put together a resource for our advisors, our clients, and our prospective clients, and quite frankly, the Houston community about the things you need to consider whether you are worried about being laid off or you're actually in the process.
Well, let me ask you a question. Is there a way, if you even think about you think you might be laid off, is there a way to prevent that?
Well, there's no way to prevent it unless you're the CEO and you have control over it. But one of the best ways to be able to do it, and quite frankly, Mike, all of these ideas are laid out in detail in the Recession Survival Guide. All of our listeners can see that link down at the bottom of YouTube. But the first thing you need to do is go talk with your boss. Don't ask, am I going to be laid off? Ask, how am I doing in my job? Is there anything I can do to improve? Make yourself as best you can indispensable. Be proactive. Don't worry. It's kind of like investors. People are worried not looking at their 401k statements. That doesn't mean you should make serious reactions. Don't go crying to your boss saying, are you going to fire me? Try to find a way to be more indispensable to your manager and to the firm.
Well, what would you recommend is, again, so let's just say that you probably feared you're going to be laid off. What are some of the things you need to start thinking about and start putting together in regards to being prepared for that, if there's such a thing?
Well, in the Survival Guide, I talk about putting together a layoff survival kit. Okay. And those are things you would need because let's say things are going to be difficult. My son got laid off from Oracle. He was actually doing really well. He already has 3 job prospects out there. He was making a boatload of money in sales for Oracle, but they did a broad 10% layoff. Okay. Remember, just because you're being laid off, if you're listening to us out there, that doesn't mean it's about you. The company needs to right size sometimes to make sure it can financially survive. In that same vein, you need to be prepared as an employee and possibly for your family, if you're married or have children, to make sure you could do it. So start building that kit. Know how to get a hold of your benefits. Get the phone numbers. If you have stock options, get those offering documents. If you have things like health insurance, make sure you understand it. Know if it's portable. Know whether you're going to have HIPAA and the ability to maintain your health insurance. If you have different types of things that you typically have only access to at your work computer but are personal, make sure you have those passwords. There's a whole bunch of things you need to be able to do. We all lived through COVID. We all learned how to work at home. For people in office, you need to make sure you have access to those tools at home. So in the event you find yourself walking into your office with a cardboard box, you know what to put in there, or maybe even better off for those personal things, don't take business records, but for those personal things, make sure you have those at home.
Well, and also things you mentioned, retirement plans, right? Look at your 401k. A lot of times we see this, Scott, people leave 401ks at their former employer. Make sure you roll that over into an IRA, or you move that to, if you get another job down in the future, you move that to another 401k. So
and now isn't it a great time to figure out how you would need to do that?
Absolutely.
Because what if the HR manager's laid off?
And
It's
if there's
good to be
any
able to do
severance
that.
pay, vacation pay, all those things that you may be owed, you want to make sure you know where that is, and of course, make sure you get paid those different things.
And knowing those things, you might know what capital you may have while you're looking for a job. Has your company historically had layoffs? Has your company typically done severance packages? What does those look like? Keep those types of things in place to make sure that when this happens, where possible, you could be treated equitably.
So now doing all these things, now kind of coming into personal finance, this gets into budgeting, looking at your household. I mean, what are some of the other things you can do as far as looking at your personal finance in consideration of a layoff?
Well, I think it's really good. First, on the non-financial side, if you're worried about it, talk with your spouse, talk with your partner, talk with your children. Let them know, maybe even now if it's pre-layoff, maybe we need to start preserving cash and reducing discretionary spending. Make sure that you have the credit you may need. Make sure you're in the place you need to be. It's very hard, as an example, if your car's about to fall apart, to buy a new car.
Sure.
Without a job, but that would also mean instead of buying a $50,000 car, if you're worried about it, maybe you need to buy a $25,000 car, or even a used car, or maybe get your car repaired while you have money not to worry about it. All of those things are somewhat non-financial, but at the end of the day, just like a business failing, a business typically fails because of lack of cash. Without planning, without discussion to your family, and without knowing that you will have the cash flow to possibly get through 6 months or longer without having a job, this is the time to stop doing what you are doing and maybe doing Starbucks and start making sure that you have access either to credit or that safety fund we talk with people about, 3 to 6 months of spending. And make sure that's there and you know where to get it, and it won't be subject to a market loss, because recessions typically aren't kind to stock markets, as we've seen earlier this year.
Well, and I think it's important because a lot of times typically people don't have, they'll go tap their 401ks, and if they're doing that prior to, there's penalties. There's lots of things to think about. Making sure you know where to get that cash for the emergency is very important, so know that prior to. And I think you stress the importance, make sure the family's involved, having that emotional support from your family to know that you're not doing that on your own. And that way everybody's got to make sacrifices, everybody's got to make cuts, because that is very difficult in reality to do. So I think that's important. Now, talking about getting back on the horse, right? So you've been laid off, you've gone through this, you've gotten your budget in place, you're trying to survive, now getting back on the horse and getting that job. What is some advice there?
Well, one of the things, and I talked about that Layoff Survival Kit, one of the things should be your employee manual, your human resources manual. It may have things in there about outplacement and all those types of things you need to do. I think it's really good. You talked about the crying CEO on LinkedIn, but at a time of a layoff, don't be woe is me, want to go in a cocoon, go to a bar, cry with your friends who are also laid off. Be on the front end of it. Be out there on LinkedIn saying, hey, I've been laid off. I'm looking for a new job. I would really like to talk with you. Yeah. Go to alumni websites of your school or university. Reach out to friends. Let people know what's going on. Don't think of it as something that's hard for you. When my son got laid off, he let me know that they were doing it. I said I have been reading about that at Oracle. And then he calls me the next Monday. I was just called to my manager. He said it was not me, but I'm going to be part of that layoff. They'll be letting me stay on until the next paycheck. Then they're going to give me like 3 or 4 weeks of severance. And I said, Nathan, you need to get out on LinkedIn. You need to start telling people. You need to go to college and fraternity websites. Let people know. I'll go out to some of the people I know. As an example, one good friend of mine is an executive in sales at Microsoft. They're actually going through some of those things. And when my son actually was looking to go for a job, I can't remember the name, he looked at the name of the company and found out that my friend knew some of the people there. So I reached out to my friend, and my friend, his name's Jeff, wrote a wonderful letter of introduction from my friend to the person he was interviewing with. Any type of things, those connections we have, yes, those relationships we have. I know it's difficult for those that don't have relationships, but that is an asset, a non-financial asset that you, your friends, and your family may be able to do to help you find that next job. And maybe that next job will be wonderful. Be positive, wake up smiling, get some exercise that gets those endorphins running, and do whatever you can.
Keep yourself positively motivated.
Absolutely.
Keep yourself active. Scott, we're going to have a whole series continuing. What do you think we should cover?
Well, with the recession, one of the things you'll see if you go to the website link down below is when I started writing the format for the recession survival guide, what I realized is that it impacts people differently at different levels. So like my son, who's living by himself, the only person he has to take care of is him and his dog. Sure. So at different stages in your life and career, you have different things. So we're going to go through each stage of life, whether it be early career, just getting married with a new family, mid-career, late career, just about to retire and in retirement. We're going to go through what a recession means to you at each stage in life and try to help you better survive this coming recession.
Well, great, Scott. Look forward to the next coming episodes.
Thanks, Mike.